Welcome back to FXRG. Got a really groundbreaking episode today. I'm actually going to record me doing work on the bike, which is like a first because up until this point I've pretty much done it off camera and then just talked about what I did. There's probably people who don't even think that I actually do my own work, I'm sure, but today we're actually going to change that. Let me show you the bike and talk about what the plan is. Alright, so currently this is how the bike is sitting. You can see I got some new accessories. I'll talk about that in a bit. I have the gas tank already off the bike. I did that last night just to make things a little easier in this video. So I'm sure you recall me talking about in some of the prior videos how even though I installed new gaskets up top here, these seals around the rocker cover bolts like immediately ripped and started dripping. In fact, you can see the oil. Not only that, I think I didn't do a very good job in aligning this mid cover on this back cylinder, so it's actually leaking in the corner a little bit. So today, the plan is to replace those. That's the main thing. But as part of that, I'm also going to change the front motor mount. I bought a new one, and I'll be putting that in. Since I'm going to have to drop the engine off the front mount to be able to even access those rear bolts. And then I also purchased, and I'll show you over here, as usual, my garage is filthy, sorry. I also purchased these rocker shaft inserts. These are kind of like the rocker lockers, the DK sells. This is a company that does the same thing, but they're about 10 bucks cheaper. So these are actually going to go in the rockers as well to hopefully reduce some of the top end noise. I have a little bit of clicking in the very top end. Like, it's not bad, it's general Evo noise, but I'm hoping this will help out a lot. So I'll be putting those in. So it's the front mount, don't mind all this stuff of planning out my oil lines. Front mount, rock outs, and then I got, instead of fiber washers, I got the James, these are metal and rubber washers that are going to go on that rocker cover gasket. So that's what I'm going to be putting in today. I guess let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so one of the first things I have to do to be able to drop the engine down to replace this mount is I need to take off the voltage regulator. I'm not going to disconnect it or anything, but the bracket needs to be removed from the frame so that way it's out of the way. So it's just 7/16 on the front and the back. Okay, both those are off, so this should move. There is wires here in the way. One of these is a plug that I should be able to actually undo. Yeah, right here. It's actually kind of round. Oh, I see. I have a zip tie on there. So let's snip that. Pull this off. Now it's out of the way. Okay, the next step is going to be to remove the bolt that runs through the mount and the isolator. It is 9/16 on both sides. The bolt's kind of long, so you have to use an open-end wrench on the bottom because the socket wrench won't fit over it. Well, unless you have a deep well socket, which I don't. Now, what I'm doing, because I don't want to throw off the alignment of this motor. Like, it's already pre-aligned from the factory. Oop, there's power on that. I suppose I should disconnect the positive. This linkage right here is what governs the alignment of the bottom of the motor. I'm not going to remove this from here or here or here. I'm not going to touch it, basically. I'm going to pull the center bolt out, and I'm going to have to pull off these two bolts here. I'll do that only after I get a support underneath the engine. And I should be able to pull this front mount up and out of the way. And then the front of the engine is going to be totally disconnected. So I'm going to get this center bolt out. Then I'm going to disconnect the battery because I did get a little shock. I touched the voltage regulator down here. I'm pretty bad about remembering to undo the power. Usually not a big deal, but, you know, if I were to touch the positive,
with my wrench and then touch it to the spot on the frame, it could spark and give me a fright. So I will do that, and you should do it too. You should do it first. I just always forget about it. So, and since I'm not really touching anything power related, I didn't think about it, but I guess technically that voltage regulator is power related. So I'll do that next off camera. Alright, so there's the mount that runs through the isolator, and it has this big, huge washer on the back side of it. Alright, I'm going to disconnect the power, and be right back. Okay, power's disconnected, so no more shocks. So now what I'm doing, and as you notice, I'm doing this off of any kind of jack or anything at the moment. I don't have a lift to where I could fit a jack underneath it. I just have a regular motorcycle jack, but that doesn't allow me to jack up the engine separately. So I do it on the side stand. I've done it before. It works just fine. You can see what I've done here. Let me try to get the camera down there. I have regular floor jack like for a car, and I stuck something in between. It's actually just a Brillo pad, but I just stuck something in between the metal and the bottom of the engine case so it doesn't scuff it all up. Oh, I'm not really worried about that. So what I do is I put this on the very corner of the engine since it is sideways. And all I need to do is just provide a little bit of upward lift on the motor, and that will get this mount pulled up a little bit. And you should be able to see that happen as I do it. So let me get the camera adjusted. Okay. And it doesn't take much, but you see as I lift, that mount is lifted up from there. Now that's about as far as I'm going to go. I don't actually want to lift it. The goal is I actually need to move it down. But I'm lifting it now because I can undo these bolts that hold the actual mount in, pull this out, and then I can get the isolator out. And let me see, I think it's 9/16. Yep. So I should have everything I need here to do this. And it's kind of a tight spot, as you can see. Alright, so there's a bolt with a washer, there's a nut, and there's also a little lock washer on the bottom. So that's one side. Let's see if I can get the other side from here. Alright, now, you might be wondering, why don't I just take the isolator out right now? Because I'm actually going to have to put this mount back on to support the motor. The reason is because, oh man, me put that on tight. The isolator's too fat to get out, actually, believe it or not. It's too fat to get out of this without removing this front mount altogether. You can't actually pull it up out of the frame. You could loosen it, but it won't come out. So this has to come out. And then it immediately has to go back, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. It's kind of a juggling act. Of course, when I put this back on, I'm not going to tighten everything completely. There you go. Because I'm just going to have to redo it again later. And now it's force on those, so it might be hard to get them out. So now this can come up and out of the way like that. And now I have all the room to remove the isolator, which I think is also 9/16. Yes, it is. And if you're in Florida right now, we've had a couple of cool days, and it's been beautiful, but it is already back up to sweltering outside. I'm not getting this. Oh, you know what? Oh, wait. Those bottom nuts, I think, are actually bigger than 9/16. Ah, it's actually 11/16 on the bottom. So 9/16 on the top and 11/16 on the bottom. So this is a bolt with a washer, and the nut on the bottom, this is what I'm talking about, that's 11/16. It's this big flange nut. I'm going to keep those together so I don't mix up where they go. And one more. Now, the isolator can come out. So that's what was in there. I can't tell if this is original or not. I'll tell you what it is. Cracked, dry, disgusting. So that's gonna go right in the trash. Now, here's the kind of confusing slash difficult part I had to figure out the first time I did this is actually going to go back on temporarily. I'm sure there's probably a different way to do this if you have all the right tools and a lift and all that stuff. It's probably way easier, but I don't have that, so I got to do what I got to do. So temporarily I'm going to put this mount back on. I'm not going to even like tighten these bolts. Just going to snug them in. I didn't put the little lock washers in there because, like I said, I'm just going to be taking them back out towards the end anyway. So, I don't want to put too much. This is just going to act as a support for the engine temporarily. Snugging it, not flicking it. This will all make sense while I'm doing this in a minute. Okay, those are snug down. So, the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to put, one of these wood, this is just like a flooring shim or something. I'm going to put that in between here, watch your fingers, and I'm going to release the jack. So now the motor's sitting on the front mount is just sitting on the frame. But what this has allowed me to do is to get more room on top of the engine to take the valve cover. I always want to say valve cover since I'm used to working on cars. The rocker cover off. So now I can pull out my jack from underneath the bike, and then I'm going to set up the camera on top and show you where we're at there. Okay, so essentially what we've done is just lowered the motor down enough to where I'll be able to slip that special Allen wrench back and access that corner rocker cover bolt, which you cannot access through the top. So that whole dropping in the engine down thing that I just did is solely just to be able to get out one bolt. If you don't do it, you cannot get that bolt out, and therefore you cannot do this. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to remove all 8. So the 4 on this and the 4 on this are going to come out, and I'm going to pull the tops of the rockers off. The rocker cover tops in the mid section as well. Once I do that, I will probably have to put the bike on the jack, because to put those rocker cover locker pieces in, I have to pull out the main bolts that hold the rocker assemblies down. And technically you're supposed to do that with all of the pressure released off of the push rods. I'm going to see how I feel about that when we get in there, because I'm doing one at a time. I feel kind of comfortable not turning the wheel and getting the pressure off of the rocker cover. I don't know. I'll see when I get in there. So anyway, these are coming off next. I'm going to do the front one first because these are easy to access. There's plenty of room up front. By the way, if I was just not trying to record, this is why I hate recording while I'm doing this stuff. If I wasn't recording, I would walk over to the other side of the bike to get these back ones. But that's the problem with recording is I don't want to get in the shot and then have to squeeze back there and blah, blah, blah. So it's just it's a little extra work to record what I'm doing. So all 4 of these are going to come out with the copper washers, with the steel washer, with the fiber washer, everything. And don't really have to worry about which order these go back in because these are all the same. And I'm only reusing the steel washer that's in these. That's too tight. See, that's how I know to stuff is settled or shaken loose a little bit since I did this originally because some of these are much looser than others. So I'll probably do a little bit of blue Loctite. I don't think I did any Loctite, which is probably the issue. I tried not to do Loctite as much as possible because it just makes it difficult to get everything out later. And I know use Loctite everywhere on a Harley, blah, blah, blah. I got you. All right, so top cover should just come off or not. There we go. The mid cover came off with it and along with the gasket. Everything came off. That's okay, because I need to get that off anyway. So this just goes to show you how well that this one sealed up because the top cover actually stuck to the mid cover. And this was not leaking, so that's cool. I'll just leave that like that. I'll have to put this gasket back on when I put it back together, but for now, I'll just keep it off. I am running out of room in this garage, though. I'll tell you what. I can have... I didn't really set anything. Alright, so... Okay. For the back. The 2 bolts on this side are easy because they're not underneath the frame. Man, these are really tight too. That's probably why they started leaking. I don't know why these are so much tighter than the other ones. Oh, you know what? I tightened these down because they were leaking. That's why. But it didn't help. Which is why I'm doing this. So it actually works best, in my opinion, to access that bolt from this side, which it was not tight at all. So that explains, that's just it. This explains why I was kind of leaking more in that corner. Is because one side was really tight, the side I could easily access, I tightened up in order to try to stop the seeping I was getting. But the problem with that is now the rocker cover is sitting crooked and just making it leak worse. So I got to tighten these down evenly. It's just a big hassle because of how hard it is to get to those back bolts. 1, 2. I'll be able to get those with my hand. This is such a tight design. It's pretty crazy. 3. And the real hard one. Now, I actually, admittedly, this very corner bolt, the one that's so tight to the frame, I actually cut it down when I put this together because they're way longer than they need to be. There's so much contact area there that there's more than they need. So I cut it down a little bit to just make it easier to get in. Get wrenches out of the way. Hopefully, they're tight. I'm making someone cringe right now because I'm sticking the metal prying device in there. I'm going to be very careful. So there's the top cover. The mid cover did not come out with it like the other one. And these are all brand new. Oh man, these are brand new seals, but this one's already ruined on that side. It got pinched. So that also explains why I was getting some leaking. Dang, that's very unfortunate. So I may need to get another one of these. Oh boy. Alright, we'll put it back together and see what happens. I gotta get one, I gotta get one. Alright, let me show you where these rocker things go. So, here's the rocker assemblies. Those rock outs, they will end up going in these holes. So the way this works is the pin that runs through the rocker is actually just kind of loose in there. This bolt is supposed to keep it from moving in and out. There's like a half moon shape cut into the end of that pin. Problem is it kind of wiggles around in there, and because of that you get a little bit of top end ticking. So there's 4 brass like little sleeves that are going to go in each one of these holes and theoretically lower the amount of noise that we have. So it should be just that easy. Now I can see that these rockers on the front cylinder, they look to be up actually. So I might get away with just, and there's probably people who are going to be like, oh my god, it's going to ruin it. I might be able to get away with just pulling these out if I do one at a time. I know that that will put some force on the corner of this, but what you may not be able to see is there are other bolts that hold the rocker assembly down. Namely one right here, there's one on each side, there's 2 in the front as well. So I think it'll be okay. I'm going to see if I can spin the push rods. If I can spin them, then they're loose enough for me to remove those one at a time and everything will be okay. So hang tight, I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm going to try to show what we're dealing with here. This front cylinder has enough pressure off of these to where I can take these out one by one and do this without turning the engine over. The back one I'll probably have to do something about. So this is the bolt that fits down in there. You can see if you look, let me get the camera. If you look at that rocker pin right there, and I'm not pulling it out all the way because I don't want to have trouble getting it back in, but there's like a half moon shape cut into it. When you put the bolt through, if it's lined up right, you put the bolt through, it sits in that half moon shape. The problem is, there's a lot of play in between those, and so you get some rattling because this will move back and forth. And you can tell because if you look at the bolt, and sorry for the focus, but here, let's see if I can do it. If you look at the bolt, you can kind of see marks on the bolt here where that rocker shaft pin was moving back and forth on it. So this should help my situation. Now what I'm going to do, and I got to kind of do this off camera, is I need to get that pin in and make sure that that half moon shape is lined up well with this. I'm not going to be able to hold the camera, so I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so I got that all lined up. This is the tapered brass bushing. I put it down in that hole. I made sure that it was moving freely, so it's not going to bind up. And basically what you do is you put the bolt back in, and you very slowly drive it in, and it pushes that bushing down into the hole. Now there should be very little force when you're doing this. It should slide in easy. If it doesn't slide in easy, there's a problem. And I'm turning this and it doesn't feel like there's any resistance, any more than normal. Well, I don't say not anymore, but there's very little more than normal resistance when I'm putting this bolt in. So I know that it's not getting bound up in there. Now it is getting a little tighter as I go down, and it pushes a little further in because, there, like I said, there's a taper. So it's actually getting wider as it moves down inside. So that seems to be seated. Now what I'm going to do, just to double check, because this is my first time using these, I'm going to pull it back out, and I just want to look down in there and see how that brass sleeve got seated in there and make sure that everything looks okay. Oops, just hitting the camera with the wrench, no big deal. And because now this is tightening up the tolerance between the bolt and between everything else, there is a little bit of extra drag on this, but it's not an unusual amount. If you were turning this and it was like stuck or you had to really crank on it, that's a big sign that something's wrong. But yeah, so just a little bit of extra force on this, but not much. These are extremely long bolts, by the way. So let's see what we got. And actually, the washer actually, it's hard to see. I'll try to show you. So the sleeve's down in there, you can see the brass, but it actually pushed into the washer a little bit, which I think is okay. I don't think that's a problem, but what I'm probably going to do is pop that washer off and try to drive that down the rest of the way. Okay, I did end up putting the bike on the jack so I can put the bike in gear and spin over the engine to take the pressure off, because I was going to have to do it for this back one anyway. But I got that front one in, no problem. That's torqued down to like 15, 16 foot-pounds. The reason why I knew I had to do it is because when I got this bolt out, I couldn't freely move this pin. So that meant that there was still pressure on that rocker pin. So turn the engine, now there's no pressure on it. I'm going to just make sure that this all moves freely, get that lined up, and then install the other rock out in that hole. Well, I can't really say that I recommend these. Thankfully, they give you an extra one, because the first one mushed a little bit, like right at the end. The very top of it started mushrooming. This one started mushrooming almost immediately. Now, I know you got to make sure that that hole's open and it's lined up. I did that. I made sure that everything was lined up, but it started happening anyway, and then I had to dig that thing out of there. So, like I said, they include an extra one, so that's good. So from here on out, I can't mess up any more of these. One thing I'm going to try to do, I mean, there's plenty of oil down in that hole, but I guess I'm going to try to lube the next one up a little bit better, and maybe that'll slide in there. Yeah, so PSA, like, you got to be real careful with these things. Yeah, because if one mushes, I mean, this isn't far enough that theoretically it was like this far. Theoretically, I could have just flush cut the top of it and it still would have been effective. But, you know, I would have felt funny doing that. So, and of course, you don't want to get any little brass pieces floating around in your valve cover or valve train. So I'm going to get another one and try to get it in right, and hopefully it works. Alright, I got this one on the second time, and it started to kind of mushroom out towards the end too, even with a bunch of grease on it. So, not a fan. I'd probably try the Rocker Locker brand if I ever did this again. I feel like these ones are either, one, just way too soft of a brass, maybe it's too thin, or two, it's actually possible that they might be a little bit too long, and they're bumping up against the bottom of something here. They're longer than they need to be, because that sucker gets down there way past that pin and it's still moving. So I got to be real careful with the next ones. But yep, so far both of these mushroomed out like right towards the bottom. Now, I don't think it'll hurt anything. It's real soft, so I just kept going, and it, you know, I was able to torque it down, and you can't see anything. But what happened is the brass sort of pushed up past the washer a little bit. Not a huge deal. I don't think it's going to affect anything. Obviously, if you want to get these out, you might be able to... So the way I got this one out when that busted the first time is I actually took a little pick, and I got it just under the side of the bushing, and I was able to kind of push it out, and then I drove the pick down, and what that did is it folded the middle of the bushing in, or the sleeve, I should say. And once that was folded in, I was able to get a needle nose in there and twist it, and that basically just folded it in on itself, and it came right out. So I think you could remove it from the top, but in a worst case scenario, to get those out of there, you'd have to actually pull the rocker boxes off and push them out with a punch from the inside. So anyway, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the wheel to get all the pressure off of these, to get these on the base circle. And then I should be able to remove these one by one and also put those things in there, and hopefully have no more issues. So I'm going to do that, and I'll be back after. Okay, I got all four of those rock outs in. Yeah, every one of them mushroomed up, but I just pushed through them, and they'll still be effective. Not a fan of the design. Now, probably what I would do, well, hindsight is 20/20. Probably what I would do if I had to do this all over again, and I didn't even think about it because I didn't realize how tight of a fit it was going to be, I would probably throw the whole set of those in the freezer night before, just so they can shrink down a little bit. and that probably would have made them go in much easier. But can't do anything about it now. They're in there. They're tight, and they seem like they're going to be effective. This rocker pin, something was a little goofy. Now, the majority of my ticking actually came from the front cylinder, and there was a lot of witness marks on this bolt, so I have a feeling it was this rocker pin moving a lot. But this one was really tight, like unusually tight. It didn't easily slide back and forth in here like the other ones did, so kind of bizarre. But nothing seems worn, nothing seems like it got hot, there's no weird discoloration, so I don't reckon it's a big problem. Now, basically what I gotta do now is just put everything back together. So the one problem I ran into, as you saw when I was taking the covers off, is on that back rocker box. Let's see if I can get this to focus. Gosh, I can't. I'm sorry. I'm trying to do this one-handed. It just never works. Okay, there we go. Because it was leaking a little bit and I tried to tighten it down, the gasket actually did get pinched and bust. So it's a real good possibility that this gasket's going to leak. This was on the back rocker box. Problem is, if this gasket leaks on the back rocker box, I got to go through this whole bunch of work to drop the engine down and everything again. It's a huge pain. So I'm actually going to put this busted gasket on the front cylinder, because then if I do need to change it, unfortunately it'll be leaking on front, but if I do need to change it, I can actually get that front rocker cover off without doing anything to the engine or the mount. All I gotta do is pull the gas tank off and I'm good to go. So I'm just gonna flip this to this one to the front and put the good one in the back, and that should resolve that potential leaking. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this stuff back in now, get everything kind of lined up, and then I'll bring you back when I tighten it all down. Okay, so I slipped on the bad gasket. We'll see. It actually might seal just fine, but I slipped that onto the front cylinder like I talked about. Got the mid part of the box on and the cover, and I lightly put the bolts on with the new gaskets. Now what I'm going to do, these don't take a lot of torque. I'm actually going to try to tighten these down in a crisscross pattern, so that way they're being torqued down evenly, kind of like you would do with like a cylinder head or something, because I think that'll help seal up better. And when I get done with that, I'm going to move on to the back one and do the same thing. Okay, here's where I'm at. Got the rocker covers on, tightened up evenly, tried real carefully, and I think that we kind of rushed when we did this the first time. Might have been part of the problem, but I was real careful to try to line up all of this stuff, because it all kind of moves freely. Like, there's nothing, there's no like dowel pins or anything that place this stuff correctly, so there's a lot of slop. So I tried to make sure everything was lined up real good, and then I tightened them down evenly and didn't over tighten them, so everything should be fine. I took it off the jack, put it back into neutral. So now what I can do is use the car jack to jack up the front of the motor, and now I can install the new isolator. So give me a minute to get the jack under there, and I'll show you the isolator installed. Okay, I'm going to show you the way I found this best to do. So notice underneath the isolator, the holes that the bolts for the isolator go through are slotted. So that means there's naturally some side-to-side play in this thing. Now, we already know that the motor is preset because it has these links that are already set to a specific length. So this link is really our true north. This link should automatically put the motor back straight because we haven't touched it. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the bolt through the isolator, but I'm going to leave these the mounting bolts for the isolator kind of loose until we get all this on and tighten up, because then what that'll do is this will naturally straighten up based on where this is set. Then once everything's flat and level, we can tighten it down. Yeah, so I'm going to start getting these bolts in, and then I'll show you the finished product when it's done. Hey, it's Jake from the next day. So as I was wrapping up putting that isolator in, apparently I hit some kind of button on my gimbal that put the camera into like slow motion mode, and because of that there was no audio, and obviously everything was in slow motion, so I couldn't use like the last couple videos I took yesterday. So I'm back out here today. Everything's completely finished. So where I left you off is we were getting the isolator in. As you can see, everything's back together now. So once I got the main bolt through it and the mount actually bolted back up, I had my wife come out and hold the bike upright so that way the motor wasn't pushed off to the side because I did have it on the side stand. So I had her actually hold the bike up so that way the motor was sitting even. And then I did the final torque down on the two bolts on either side of the isolator, trying to give you a little bit better. It's too close, the camera won't focus. So that's all tightened down. Changing that isolator made a massive difference in the way this bike feels. Like, so much of the vibration went away. So if you have an old isolator, definitely recommend changing that. That was pretty much the end of the repair video for the most part. Now, since then, I did reattach the voltage regulator back up, which was just those two bolts, and plugged that removable cable back in. I also, and I think I did this at a different time. It wasn't while I was recording those first videos, but I put the gas tank back on, and I also ran my new fuel lines. I got this kind of clear, you can kind of see it back there, sort of clear reddish fuel line. So, and I also replaced, while I was at it and I had to take off, I also replaced the crossover fuel line in the front of the tank as well. All the fuel lines were so super dried up. So, yeah, everything's back together really well. Now, I did, after I completed the repair, the next day, I went and took it for a ride. Not a huge ride, but I did take it for a ride, and I do not have any oil leaking from these bolts, and I do not seem to have any oil leaking from the top rocker cover over here, which is where I was having a bunch of leaking. And I don't have any leaking from the front rocker cover, which, if you recall, this is the one that I put the bad gasket in, the one that got mushed. It doesn't like focusing on chrome, I apologize. But I put that gasket that got pinched in here, and actually those pinches are in this area of the gasket. And there's not any oil leaking here either, so I think I'm sealed up just fine. I also went and took the bike out and sprayed some engine degreaser on everything and cleaned it up because I wanted to see if any new oil leaks sprouted up. That would help me to see them a little bit better. And I don't have any yet. Now, again, I didn't take a super long ride, so it's very possible that I didn't ride long enough to actually have any oil come out. But you can see I also removed my ignition, my nose cone cover that goes over the ignition because I wanted to do a little bit more tuning. I started freaking out because I felt like I had the advance pretty high. And I wanted to make sure I wasn't like pinging or anything like that. And actually what it led me to do is I actually turned the advance slope up even higher yet. And I still didn't get any pinging, which is good. And I use higher octane gas in it. But what I did do by turning the advance slope up is gain a whole bunch of power. It was actually pretty incredible how much power I gained by turning that advance slope up even more. So I'm leaving the cover off for now. I know you're not supposed to do that so this doesn't get wet or anything, but I want to take a couple more rides, a couple of longer rides, so I can just make sure that the engine doesn't start pinging when it's hot. And this way, with this cover off, I can quickly adjust it. I keep a screwdriver in the bag, and I can quickly adjust this if I need to, so I'm not driving around with any pinging or anything going on. But once I'm satisfied, that cover will go back on. Also gave it a wash. What else? That was just a couple days ago. I can't remember the timeline now. Was it a day ago or 2 days ago? I don't know. So everything seems to be good. Like I said, got the tank back on. Yeah, now you can see, which I didn't have this on the other day. You can get a little bit better look at the fuel gauge. Maybe, I haven't even talked about this yet. I'm sorry. I'm confusing myself with what I covered in these videos. I did get the intellitronix electronic fuel gauge from eBay, and this is actually, I guess, kind of a PSA as well. If you go to FXR Division to buy one of these gauges, it tells you that it fits FXRs with center fill tanks. I do not have a center fill tank. I have a side fill. I figured if it fit one of those, it'll probably fit this, but it actually doesn't. See, the center fill tanks have a different kind of like dash up here with a smaller hole for these fuel gauges. And I got it. You can see that the gauge is considerably smaller this is the gauge here. I'm sorry, trying to get the focus. The gauge starts here. You can see it's smaller than the hole in the tank. So I actually had to design and 3D print like a bezel to go around it and actually make it fit in the tank. So thankfully I have that ability to do some 3D design and print out little parts like this if I need to. So I can actually take the chance of buying a gauge like that, and if it doesn't fit, I'll just be able to make it fit. So I specifically designed and printed this thing, and it's rock solid. So I am able to use that gauge. And I mean, some people don't like the fact that 3D prints have some little lines and stuff in it, but I really don't care. It works. So yeah, that's back on there. Everything's together, and the thing's just, it's running better and better. So I'm excited to see as I put on a few more miles, to just see that all of the leaking is done up on top. I think it will be. So then I can turn my attention over to the oil lines and start working on that. So that'll probably be in an upcoming video. I'm about to point, now I have just about 400 miles on this build. So it's time to change the oil, to get fresh oil in there, because there's probably is going to be some metal particles in it. So when I go to change the oil, that's a point where I'm going to pause and start working on the oil lines as well. So oil lines being this line, and this line, as well as there's two underneath that run in between the oil filter. So, and then as part of that too, I think I mentioned this in another video, this back brake line is seeping a little bit too, and it has been replaced. I also mentioned how this line's a little long. You can see how it's kind of curled up back there. And someone put an AN style fitting on here, which is great, but it's a straight fitting, which is kind of dumb because you need the line to move that way. So basically it's coming out and having to curl like this. So I got a 90-degree AN fitting for here, and I have a black brake cable or brake line that's a little bit shorter. So I'll be able to clean this back brake line up a lot. I'm also replacing this banjo bolt with a regular hex banjo bolt. I know everyone's crazy about this 12-point stuff. Not that this is a fancy 12-point like ARP or anything like that, but everyone likes the 12 points and they like the way they look. And I like the way they look too, but I don't have a lot of 12-point sockets. And to be honest with you, I kind of hate them. I'm totally cool with just a 6-sided, regular old-fashioned hex bolt. I don't know. I guess it's an aesthetics thing. Maybe that's why people like the 12-point stuff. I don't know. But anyway, so I'm switching that banjo bolt out for a regular bolt. So yeah, oil lens are going to be next. I'll give you just a quick preview here of what we have. So I got my kit from Amazon. So we have 16 feet of this AN6 hose. It's a rubber hose with a nylon mesh on the outside, but there's actually stainless steel strand running through it, so it's nice and strong. This will work perfect for oil. I decided to go with just black instead of like stainless steel or anything like that. I didn't want it to be too flashy. This kit came with a number of fittings, various fittings, and I got them in black and red. I thought that was really cool, little red accents. I had to buy a couple more. I scoped out how I was going to run all my lines, and I ended up needing 2 more 90-degree fittings, which are going to go on the oil filter, which is underneath the bike. So I just got those in straight black because you're not going to be able to see them anyway. And then I've also needed to get a little 90-degree AN6 fitting. So, and then for the oil tank side, because as I mentioned in the previous video, there aren't bungs in the oil tank for you to be able to thread in an AN style nipple. I don't know what you call that, whatever these things are. So for the oil tank side, I got these little fittings, which are just they're just for the look. You run the hose into this, and it'll let you pop it over the fitting, and then you'll tighten that down on the back. And it just kind of makes it a little bit nicer looking, even though this is technically just a worm drive clamp. Yeah. So, but then as far as like the pump and everything that has an 1/8" NPT fitting on it now, I'm going to be switching all of those 1/8" NPTs out for these 1/8" NPT to AN6 fittings. So basically what will happen is when I'm all done with this, and like I said, I already have it kind of planned out how I'm going to do everything, all my oil lines are going to be terminated at the ends by these AN6 fittings, which is really nice because there won't be any clamps. These actually will screw down onto the fittings, which is really awesome. It'll be super clean. It'll hopefully be much more oil tight than it is now with just old-fashioned clamps on everything. So that'll be happening as well. This is one of the next things I'm going to do. So I'm just kind of collecting all of my pieces that I need, and then I'm going to actually start that work soon. These are the parts, like I said, that I got for the brakes. So you may also have noticed I have a windshield now. So I found this. This is an original, I guess probably late 80s, early 90s convertible windshield. So this would have come on FXR convertibles and Dyna convertibles whenever the Dynas came out. I guess it would have been the 90s, which I think is a really rad. I'm not usually a windshield guy. I like fairings, but I'm trying to kind of keep this bike sort of like retro looking for the most part. I mean, obviously I got modern risers and bars and stuff on, things that are ergonomic. I'm gonna kind of upgrade because it's very functional. But I liked the idea of putting this old style windshield on there. So I found one with great condition. It came with all the hardware. It was only $50, if you can believe that. And there's like no imperfections in it. There's a little scratch in one place. I can't even like make you see it. No, you can kind of see it floating around. So that's on. I like it a lot. Super cool. I did take the FXR out to the Forgotten Angels campout on the Friday, and I didn't really do any filming or anything there. I was just enjoying looking at the bikes, and met a couple of the vloggers there. It was really nice to see Shay Lisi. The Diplomat was there. Her Two Wheels was there. Biker Babe Beth was there. Spike's Corner was there. And then, of course, Mike Branch, Uncle Bill Gator, who's just the man. I always really appreciate seeing him at events and talking to him. He's just a cool guy. So it was nice seeing all of them. Hopefully, I know they were all busy, so it's not like I spent time talking to all of them, but I hope to meet them and talk to them more as time goes on, since we do live in the same town. Well, not Biker Babe Beth and Her Two Wheels, but you know what I mean. So anyway, that's where it's at. Everything's looking good. Just want to get this video finished editing up and get on to the next set of work I'm going to be doing. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Hope you enjoyed finally seeing me work on things. Sorry it wasn't a whole lot to see because I was crawling around on the ground, but hopefully it was still informative. Please like and subscribe. Please give me a thumbs up. Please share the video with people who might be interested. And I love when you comment, so appreciate that. Keep it all up. And we'll see you on the next one.